All right, last lecture of the course. Thanks for sticking it out this long. Hope that you have enjoyed at least parts of it. So this is sort of this is the last chapter in the Rachel's book. So these are some of more specifically like Rachel's thoughts on what Rachel doesn't offer like the best moral theory. We've seen a bunch of different ones, right? We've seen advantages and problems, and we haven't come to a definite conclusion about what the correct moral theory is. So here, Rachel sort of draws some conclusions, not about sort of specifically what is the right moral theory, but at least some of the, we might say, necessary conditions of a satisfactory moral theory. So again, we've surveyed, I think, some of the most influential moral theories, covered utilitarianism, deontology, cultural relativism, ethical egoism, virtue ethics, care ethics, right? Uh, Contract theory, divine command theory. Did I miss any? A lot, right? And all of them have a certain amount of appeal, right? They all have things going for them, and they all have certain problems that are specific. We haven't concluded that any one theory is a clear winner, right? So does this mean we should give up? Does this mean ethics, is not really objective anyways, and it's sort of meaningless and there's no point? Not at all, right? And certainly this is one thing I think Rachel tries to hammer home, and that I agree with. Like, ethics is sort of an objective study, just as any other sort of discipline that you'll encounter in this university, right? We're really no worse off than any other academic discipline in this respect, right? We've learned a lot. There's theories out there, but there's more to learn, and we have to determine which theory is right, right? Above me is the measurement problem in quantum mechanics, right? There are different theories, right, of the right way to interpret quantum mechanics. Um, they're still up in the air. There's no not complete agreement on these things. So this is the nature of sort of inquiry, right? So ethics is one other endeavor. Um, but we have learned some things, right? It's not that we've learned nothing. We can, I think, say that a satisfactory moral theory will have certain specific elements. One would be a modest conception of human beings, right? So we did see that some of our moral theories um, placed humans somehow either as the only creatures worthy of moral consideration or somehow special, either by as designed by God or by virtue of our having certain kinds of brains or whatever, certain of the ability to reason and so on. Um, I think we can sort of rule these theories out, right? It's clear that humans have a place in the universe, um, but we're not the center of it, right? Um, in fact, our place in the universe is fairly modest. So, the Big Bang happened some 13.8 million years ago, billion years ago. Um, the Earth formed 4.5 billion years ago. Humans appeared less than 100,000 years ago. Uh, right, so on like cosmic time scale, we're just a little blip. And even within that little blip, we're one among many different species. Uh, the fact that we exist at all is largely due to, a little bit of luck and evolution. Things easily could have gone differently, right? Some fluctuation in temperature or just a random genetic mutation, and no human ever exists. So it's a little hard to believe in the moral theories that place humans at the center of the moral universe. We're certainly smarter than other species. Um, we do have, there's something to what Kant said about the fact that we have desires, right? That we sort of bring normativity into the world, but it's um, not, I think, stretching credulity to say that certain animals have desires, right? You say that animals want food and things like that. So um, anything you try to pick out about humans is a little hard to rule out other creatures as well as having that trait, and so it's hard to pin right the key to morality on any particular trait that humans have. So that should probably be captured by whatever moral theory we have out there. We've seen one moral theory, utilitarianism. That's sort of now I think for Mill, right, that was a problem with the swine objection. Now we'd probably say that's a plus, right? That yeah, it takes into account that beings besides humans can suffer and that matters morally. Right? But rationality does matter, right? There is an important component of ethics that has to do with reason. Um, a moral truth, right, whatever those end up being, um, is a reason to do something or a reason to not do something, right? Um, reason is not the only uh, way, not the only cause of our actions. Right? We can also act on instinct. So reasons are sort of a special class of motivations, right? And moral actions seem to require reasoning, right? So babies, right, before they reach a certain level of development, right, they act largely on instinct, sucking motions and things like that. You wouldn't really say that anything a baby does is moral or immoral. They're not yet at the stage where you could, right? In order to reach that stage, they need to be able to act for reasons and act for the right reasons. One of the important facts about reasons is that they're universal, right? The point of a reason is you could talk to anyone and you could convince them, right? Um, what reasons are for. So they apply universally to everyone, right? Um, we've used this, right, facet of morality to make sense of certain uh, intuitions we have, right? So the immorality of racism, right? We saw it turns out, right, one interpretation of why it's wrong is because it involves treating groups of people differently for no good reason, right? If you're going to treat a class of people differently, you need to have good reason for it. And their race just isn't a good reason, right? It's sort of arbitrary. Um, so the very sort of essence of morality demands impartiality, right? Uh, everyone should count equally unless there's a good reason not. Uh, this aspect is important, right? And your moral theory should capture, right, this relation between reasoning and morality. But by the same token, we should treat everyone equally. But there's also an important strand in our moral thinking about treating people the way they deserve, right? And this came out in Kant, right? He said, look, if you are violating the categorical imperative, right, you're saying implicitly, I want to live in a world where that's okay, right? So if you kill somebody, you're implicitly saying, yeah, this is sort of universal. I deserve to be treated. And something about this is right, right? We want to treat people differently when there's good reason to do so. And when such a reason exists, we want to be able to say that that person deserves their better or worse treatment. So when someone is kind or generous, right, we feel they deserve to be treated with kindness and generosity. When someone is unkind, we feel less obligation to treat them with kindness. Um, why, right? What could justify that? Something about the assumption that each person is a responsible agent, right, that acts for reasons, right? They make choices about what they value. So if you behave as though you don't value kindness, then we don't necessarily feel obligated to give that to you, right? Um, and when you exist in society, you can largely expect to receive the sort of treatment you give more complicated than that, right? Some people receive bad treatment for no good reason, right? Um, but that's largely the idea. At least our moral theory should capture something about that. Um, and not every theory does, right? It's not clear that utilitarianism would, right? There's never, um, again, if someone does something bad, inflicting pain on them, right? That's just more bad for the utilitarian. So they have to, there's ways that you can add up the numbers that makes it right to sort of punish someone, but that's not sort of the default for utilitarians. And you'd want a moral theory that kind of makes that closer to the default. But we've already seen that impartiality is not the only important thing about morality, right? Sometimes um, we do want to treat certain people better than other people, right? And that sometimes that feels like the right thing to do. For example, uh, parents and children, right? People and their loved ones, their spouses. There's a certain expectation that, in fact, it's morally good to treat those people better than you would treat us. In general, it seems like it's sort of on a continuum, and the closer a relationship you have with someone, the greater duties and obligations you have to them. And it also, we want to say that people can have even more specific motives that are morally praiseworthy, right? So, depending person by person, like Beethoven, for example, great composer, probably spent a lot of time composing, could have been helping the poor. But for him, given his talent, right, and what his symphonies have meant to the world, everyone largely agrees, yeah, it was right for him to spend that time composing and not in write a soup kitchen or something. Um, so we want to value impartiality, but we also want to value particular people for particular reasons. So Rachel suggests sort of multiple strategies of utilitarianism. He thinks that you can start with utilitarianism as the general broad outlook, right? Um, but then also within that have particular strategies that capture these important parts about reality, right? People getting what they deserve, different motives, right? Being special cases and so on. So you might say, look, on the whole, big picture, the world would be better off if we treat everyone equally, but there's exceptions, right? Um, it's going to be better overall for society, even from a utilitarian perspective, right? There will be more pleasure and less pain if children get from their mothers, right? And if murderers get punished for their crimes, right? And if great composers like Beethoven get to spend more time composing. Now, our personal motives, right, for all these things won't necessarily be utilitarian, right? So when you are lavishing attention on your child, you're not necessarily thinking, this is the best for, right, the world at large. No, that's not what you're thinking, right? You're not doing a utilitarian calculus in your head, but that's fine, right? Utilitarianism is an account of objective morality, what is right and wrong, big picture, not necessarily psychologically what's going on, right, in your motivations. So each of us personally might have a sort of best plan for our own life that has all kinds of right motivations that have nothing to do with utilitarianism, right, in our own heads. We're not thinking utilitarianly, but overall, right, with everyone else's best plans, they add up to the best utilitarian picture, the most pleasure and the least pain, right? So that means that Beethoven can concentrate mainly on composition, right? Because that's what he cares about, right? And he's not thinking about whether that's good for the world, but overall, in the end, the world is better off if Beethoven gets. So this does, like all utilitarian theories, entail that the moral community we're obligated to consider when we act is very large, right? It's the whole world, the whole universe, really. Um, that can be hard to do, obviously, right? That's a lot of math in your head, calculating the pleasure and pain for all people for all time, right? Um, but that is just now, particularly now in modern times, part of the demand of morality, right? When it happens a lot in consumerism, right? When you purchase a product, you have to think, am I supporting child labor in some other country, and so on, right? That is just, you have to get used to that, right? Um, we also need to get better at considering how our actions affect future generations, right? This is a big issue with climate change, right? People have not been thinking about 100 years down the road, 50 years down the road, and that's caused us a lot of problems. Um, it seems in these cases, right? Yeah, modern economies, modern technologies sort of outpaced our psychology and our ability to think ethically, right? So many of your actions affect far more people than they would have even 100 years ago, right? When even your economics, the things you buy, probably didn't have many effects outside of your community or your state. Now it's a worldwide economy, right? Our brains are still accustomed to just thinking about sort of people we see on a daily basis. But it's hard, but it's just something we have to work on, right? Objectively, morality says, look, things have changed the last 100 years. You have to start caring about people in the other side of the world. You have to start caring about other generations. And finally, justice and fairness, right? So incorporating some degree of utilitarianism into our outline of a satisfactory moral theory, you might worry we've given up on notions of right, justice, fairness, right? All the things that, again, deontology was capturing, utilitarianism was having trouble with. Um, as you recall, utilitarianism seemed to entail that, right, it was right to frame an innocent person, right, if it could prevent a lot of pain, right? And our intuition said, no, justice dictates that you never sort of punish or frame an innocent person. Right? Now, Rachel's has tried to work desert into this outline, right? That we treat people according to what they deserve, not just um, on the pain. Or strictly speaking, he thought that we could work it in by saying, well, overall, it will generate more pleasure and less pain for the whole world if people are treated as they deserve. We treat criminals worse because they deserve it, and overall, this sort of system creates more pleasure and less pain. Um, can we really reconcile these two sets of intuitions? They seem fundamentally at odds, right? It kind of remains an open question. I don't think even Rachel is claiming that he's solved these problems, right? But he's just putting something out there, saying, "Look, he doesn't want to end with this is an insoluble problem, and there was no point in even thinking about it." He wants to say we are making progress. There is a sketch, right, for maybe a framework, right? He hasn't filled in the details. It's up to you and future generations of philosophers to do that. But he gives us a start. All right, well, that is it for the lectures, right? I imagine you're still working on your papers. Feel free. I'll still have office hours. Come find me. Talk to your TA, and I'll help you with anything that you need help with for the rest of this course. And thank you for sticking it out.